Hello and welcome to my channel, Share It with Merit. I am Merit, and today's video is going to be on the difference between mindfulness and meditation. I get a lot of people asking me about, what are they and how are they different? I think mindfulness has really taken on a life of its own, which is great. I think we've been practicing mindfulness for a long, long, long time, but we've not always called it that. And so anyway, it comes up a lot that, people aren't quite sure, well, what is mindfulness and how is it different from meditation? And it's a fine line for starters. There's um, a lot of the process that goes on is similar, but the way I like to think about it, and there'll be different opinions on this, but the gist of it is that it's different time. Mindfulness can be done anytime, and it can be done for short periods of time. And when I mean short, I mean 30, 60, 90 seconds, okay? Because the brain, remember, the brain works so fast, right? I mean, it's going all the time at speeds I can't even fathom. So 30 seconds to the brain can actually be a long time. 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. You can make a lot of changes in that short period of time if you do it repeatedly. Whereas meditation, I think of, sort of the most extreme form of meditation are the Buddhist monks on the hill that can, meditate for hours and maybe days or even longer at a time. You have silent retreats that can go on for a week where, you're really in this deep, deep state of meditation. And so there's a big difference in terms of how much time you apply. And one thing that I think, I know this is true for me, is that I'm lucky if I can do it for 2, 3 minutes at a time. That's how my brain works. It's probably the culture I'm in, the time and place that I live in, where it's like go, 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 do, do, do. I certainly have adapted to that myself. So maybe if in a different time in a different place, I would be more able and interested in meditating and really kind of having that deeper connection with myself and the universe, if you will. Um, and so you can kind of start to see the variance there. Um, Mindfulness, I like to say, is the shit. You do one thing for your mental health, make it be mindfulness, because mindfulness is what I refer to as a stopgap. It is a stopgap, even if for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, that allows you to move from reacting to responding, right? So when you're in the middle of something, say a conflict, let's use that for an example, and you're starting to feel yourself heat up, warm up, right? Probably gonna maybe get in a place where you're gonna say something you're later gonna then have to clean up, right? Even if you're in the right in the argument, right? When you get to that place when you're coming from either defense or aggression, or self-protection, that's often when later on after the conflict, when you can kind of get perspective on it and maybe address whatever the original conflict was about. But then there's also, oh, and I'm sorry that I said this or accused you of that or whatever it may be, that just came out because you just didn't have the space to feel what you were feeling, right? And anger is often a mask for something else, right? Disappointment, resentment, envy, powerlessness, and when you just have that feeling and you don't even know what it is, you're just mad and you come from that place of anger and you just react again, then there's more cleanup to do later on. And you haven't really taken the time to understand and appreciate what is that feeling you really were feeling, right? Oh, and if I can say, hey, I need a second. I'm getting upset. I don't want to say anything that I'm going to regret. I care about you. I care about this relationship. Let's take a time out. And now with timeouts, which is, sort of a conflict technique, right? An argument tech tool. One thing about a timeout, which I'll just insert here, is that timeouts are great. They're great when you're in the conflict because they give you the space for the mindfulness. But the other piece to that to keep in mind is that when you take a timeout, you need to make sure you communicate that clearly with whomever you're having the argument with, and that you follow it up with, and let's check back in 10 minutes, let's check back in an hour, let's check back in 24 hours, depending on the level of severity or intensity or importance, or how you're feeling, and you can always say, hey, let's take 10 minutes, and in 10 minutes, if we're still not there, fine, let's try for half an hour, whatever it may be. But excuse me, it's important to have that follow-up time also added in there, because sometimes what will happen is if one person says, hey, I need time, and if the other person is triggered by that, maybe has some abandonment stuff, they're going to feel like you're just walking away, and then there's never going to be any resolution, right? But if you say, hey, I'm feeling feelings that I don't understand right now, I need to take a break, let's check back in XYZ, then they go, okay, that's reasonable, right? So now is when you that's the first step of mindfulness in this example, which is to say, hey, I'm feeling something, I need to go off and consult with the executive team up here, right? And that's how you really want your feelings and your thoughts to work together as a system, right? Feelings and thoughts aren't really separate. They're different, but they're not separate. They very much inform and interact with each other, okay? So mindfulness, again, allows you that space to stop doing and focus on being, and just bring your attention to what's happening in the room, in your head, in your heart, in your space, right? That's really all mindfulness is. It really is just bringing your awareness to the moment, the present moment, right? So you're not being flailed around by the moment, but you're actually taking a step back, and you're looking at the moment almost from a third person perspective and going, whew, okay, what's actually going on right now? Okay. And that may be all you do for starters, right? Is just to recognize the moment, right? And recognize, then the brain will start telling you what the moment is, and that's fine. Those are thoughts. So mindfulness isn't the thoughts themselves. Mindfulness is the awareness of the thought. Mindfulness is recognizing, oh, I'm already starting to judge myself or this other person, right? I'm having judgmental thoughts right now. That's okay. Mindfulness isn't judging the judging thoughts, it's noticing the judging thoughts, because unless and until you notice what's going on in here, you can't change a thing, right? You just can't. So I'll take this example a little further. So let's say we're taking a 10-minute timeout. That's a chance for you then to sit with what's going on, bring yourself to the present, and then start to go, okay, well, what is below this anger? What's happening in this conflict that's making me so angry? And let's say you realize, oh, I'm disappointed in this person. They were supposed to do X, Y, and Z. They didn't do it. So really what I'm feeling is disappointment, right? Okay. So, and then again, with your thinking, right? Your thinking can say, okay, so my anger is based in disappointment. Well, I can solve for disappointment, right? Can't really solve for just angry, right? Other than give me some space, right? But disappointment I can solve for, right? So now I'm getting a little bit, this isn't the mindfulness piece so as much, but I figured with this example, let's just throw in a little conflict resolution and a little self-awareness, right? About how you can use the feeling and the thinking system as a whole like this, right? Because then the next thing, let's say now you've recognized, oh, I'm disappointed because they didn't do this or whatever they said they were going to do. Now, and maybe in 10 minutes, if it's a minor thing, that they just, we're supposed to pick up the mail, I don't know, something, right? Something kind of, benign, right? You can come back and say, which you may not have gotten that upset about anyway, but just, so then you can say, come back in 10 minutes and say, okay, my anger is based in my disappointment that the mail was supposed to get picked up and it didn't get picked up. Now, what did I just do there? I used an I didn't use you. I used an I statement. I am disappointed because the mail didn't get picked up. And the important thing about an I statement is that you don't use the word you. Okay. I'm disappointed because the mail didn't get picked up. And what I was looking forward to was the mail, or maybe it was a special package. Let's bring it up a notch here, because maybe it was something special, right? That you warranted a little bit of pissed offness. Okay, now we can solve for that, right? Now we've come back, we've said, okay, now we can start moving in a productive, healthy uh, way in this conflict, right? And why? Well, for a lot of reasons, but the very start is because you chose to be mindful. You used mindfulness. And again, in this example, the mindfulness piece really was just that stopgap, just saying, hey, this is not going in a direction either of us want it to go in. So I'm calling time. I'm calling mindfulness. Okay. And then you take whatever time you need to sort it out, right? Use the feelings to inform the thoughts and vice versa. Right? So, and I think with mindfulness, that's really another important difference between mindfulness and meditation in this conversation is, as you can see, mindfulness can very much be a practical tool in learning about self-awareness and presence, right? And bringing your awareness to the moment, right? You can be mindful in a very positive situation, right? I remember to this day, I was on the beach a million years ago, and I remember just sitting there on the beach, and everything was just perfect. And I didn't know anything about mindfulness at the time. I was in my 20s. And I remember just sitting there. The temperature was perfect. The smells were perfect. Everything was perfect. And I remember telling myself, Merritt, remember this moment. Because, you're not going to be here for very long. So just take it in and remember this moment, because this is a wonderful moment. What was I doing? I was being mindful. I didn't know I was being mindful. I just knew I wanted to savor this moment, and I wanted to. And here's the thing about the brain too, is parts of the brain don't know the difference between, say, being on a beach in Hawaii and pretending you're on a beach in Hawaii, right? It's fantasy. This is why fantasizing works, right? I'll go into a whole other thing about fantasize versus catastrophize, because your brain is going to tell itself a story one way or the other, but you might as well fantasize versus catastrophize. And so anyway, so you can be mindful anytime is the story there. And when you can be mindful in the more neutral to positive moments, I would actually suggest that that's how you start, right? Don't start this mindfulness stuff when you're having a fight, right? Because that's not, you want to practice the fire drill before the fire, right? Or, so the way you practice is when things are good, or even neutral. If you're just having a sort of regular old normal day, start practicing it. Just start recognizing the moment. Just bring your attention. Oh, the dog is barking. Okay. Maybe there's a package at the door. Okay. Right. Oh, my phone just went. Oh, my phone's going off. Okay. Well, I'm doing a video. I'll deal with that later. Right. So right now it's a little warm in here. Okay. See, I'm just noticing and just bringing my conscious attention to this moment right now. And that's all it really is. And again, the more you do it is the key, right? If I just do that and never do it again, well, that's like, doing 5 reps at the gym and never going back to the gym, right? And the way the brain works is the more you do it, the easier it gets, and the more it becomes your natural default setting, if you will, which is the fire drill concept, right? So if you're practicing this mindfulness and you're practicing this muscle that you have in here in this organ to bring your attention to just what is going on, again, sort of like a third person observer, right? Then when you really need it, like in the conflict, that's when those fire drills are going to work in your favor. You're going to start to get the feelings that would normally maybe overwhelm you, and you'd react from that, right? You'd react. Now you're going to go, ooh, I don't want to react. I'm going to bring my attention. I don't want to react. I want to respond. I don't know what that response is now. And this is important, again, in our culture. And I may have said this I think I did share this in another video, where every time I see that headline, so-and-so breaks their silence, I find it so absurd, to be honest. It's absurd. Breaks their silence. It's been 24 hours or 48 hours or a week, or who cares? I'm pretty sure they weren't being silent, right? They just weren't responding to your constant demands for a word or a sentence or a reaction, right? No. Okay. So our culture just reinforces this idea of now, 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 now. Don't respond. React, right? There's a microphone in your face. So, we have to counteract a lot of those cultural pressures and narratives to practice the mindfulness. I got to be here. I got to do. Even like I said, I'm victim to it. I don't even try to do this for more than a few minutes at a time, and that's okay. It's working for me. Uh, but so meditation, right? Next thing, meditation. A meditation I think of as a little bit more for like a deeper, more spiritual development of yourself, where you really take that time, and maybe you start out with some guided meditations, because again, quieting the brain for longer periods at a time is harder, but the more you do it, again, the easier it gets. So if you're more interested in kind of having a deeper state of peace and calm and tranquility and inner focus, then I guess in theory too, you just extend that mindfulness time, right? And just keep extending it and keep extending it, right? Until, well, whatever, you do what works for you. That's the main thing. Okay, well, hopefully that was helpful. I guess somebody's trying to get hold of me. So I'll end on that note, and I will see you in the next video. If you want more information on me, my website, Share It with Merit, has more information, as well as a free recipe for happiness to download with an accompanying, it's a hard word to say, video. All right, bye-bye.